So now we turn to look at the evidence of the coins that have been recovered from Et Tel. And as I begin, let me acknowledge that, like a number of other presenters, I'm not an archaeologist. I'm more a scripture scholar and a historian, part of the multidisciplinary team at Et Tel. And my particular focus as the coin curator is on the coins. Let me also begin by acknowledging Donald Ariel, previously from the coin department at the IAA, who in many ways is an unacknowledged or unnamed co-author of this report. And although invited to be named as such, he said, "You go ahead and do it, Greg." And also I want to acknowledge Carl Savage, who has assisted me with information about the related finds from various loci from which we recovered coins. So we want to look at what we can learn about Et Tel from the 600 coins recovered from more than 25 years of excavations at Tel. They certainly comprise a substantial set of relevant data for understanding the identity of the community living at that location 2,000 years ago, whatever they would have called their settlement, whether they would have called it Bethsaida or something else. As we approach this, and as I thought about this presentation, I thought, well, there are four major research questions which we would want the coin data to address and hopefully resolve in some way. The first is we'd want to see how the coins relate to the dynastic rivalry between Antipas and Philip following the death of their father Herod the Great. Secondly, we'd be wanting the coins, if possible, to clarify the ethnic and religious identity and the cultural dynamics of the population from this particular location some 2,000 years ago. We'd also anticipate that if we have a complete set of coins, as in fact we do, from Ptolemy II right down to Agrippa II, if we have a complete sequence of coins from that period, then we'd expect those coins to reflect changes in the ruling authorities over that period of time. And finally, the coin evidence that we have from Et Tel, if it is a first century Galilean Jewish site, should be consistent with what we know about the Galilean economy during the Herodian period. And I'll be suggesting that the coins from Et Tel do indeed address and resolve each of these questions. So just a quick overview of the coins from Et Tel. From the classical period, we have roughly 400 coins, and you'll notice we have 59 Ptolemaic coins, have 140 odd Seleucid coins, and then there's a very clear transition, as there was also from Ptolemaic to Seleucid, a very clear transition from that Hellenistic cultural overlay to the Hasmonean control, followed by Herodian control, where the coins are entirely centered on Jerusalem, except for a few coins relating to Tiberius and Banias in the late Herodian period. Coins themselves, while of the total 600 odd coins from Et Tel, there are 2 gold, 82 silver. The vast majority of the coins are bronze, and indeed all 70 coins from Et Tel between 100 BCE and 100 CE are bronze. And that immediately tells us something about both the economic and the political status of this location during these couple of centuries. In terms of the medieval coins, which are not directly related to our question, but they do actually relate to the question of the transitions over time at Et Tel, we have only 4 Byzantine coins. In other words, during the Byzantine and the early Islamic period, almost nothing is happening at Et Tel. Activity picks up again once we get to the Ayyubid and Mamluk and early Ottoman period, and we have about 60 coins from the medieval period, that is prior to 1700 CE. And finally, for the sake of completion, we have another 100 or so coins that are modern coins. The vast majority of those are Ottoman coins, but we do have a small number of modern European coins, like 3, and we have a number of coins from the Syrian Arab Republic between 1948 and 1967, as well as another 30 plus coins which are not able to be identified. If we then try to analyse those coins by the mints where they were issued, we get a distribution like this, but to save time, let's look at it in a series of pie charts. In the Ptolemaic period, Tyre and Alexandria absolutely dominate the coin record. When we switch to the Seleucid period after 200 BCE, then Tyre dominates the coin set, and Antioch comes into play. Ptolemais becomes much more significant. Alexandria, of course, all but disappears. When we go to the Hasmonean and Herodian periods, there is a total and dramatic and immediate change. Most of the coins are now coming from Jerusalem. After 18 of the Common Era, a handful of the coins come from Tiberias, and similarly a handful of coins come from Banias, which is not surprising if Tel is part of the territory ruled by ruled by Philip. And then when we look at the Roman coins from Tel, minted prior to 100 CE, we find a much more even distribution. A couple of coins from Tiberias, a couple of coins, from Caesarea, a couple of coins from Sidon, 3 coins from Tiberias, and a couple of other coins, one from Bethshan, and so on, and one from Tyre. So the shifts in the mints reflected at Tel reflect not only the economic ties, but also the political powers in play at the time. And that becomes even clearer once we look at Roman coins at Tel after 100 CE. Once again, Tyre is back in the ring as the major source of coins. Surprise, surprise. Tiberias follows, some distance behind, but significant set of coins from Tiberias. Rome, Damascus, Bostra, and then we start to get down to a much broader scattering of coins, which is more or less what we would probably expect. So when we look at the coins, the character of the coins, the value of the coins, the distribution of mints, they're all consistent with a Jewish settlement in the Galilee during the Hasmonean and Herodian periods. The 38 Hasmonean coins include 5 which were issued by John Hyrcanus I, and that represents the transition from Seleucid to Hasmonean control. A further 18 coins can't be assigned to a particular ruler, but 15 are from Alexander Jannaeus, following more or less directly after Alexander Jannaeus. So the coin set, the Hasmonean coins that we have, clearly identify a change of culture, change of political power, and a change of cultural and economic orientation from Tyre to Jerusalem. And we can confidently say that Tel was the site of a Jewish community from that time until at least 100 of the Common Era. When we look at the coins in terms of their distribution by issuing authorities and their distribution in different areas of the site, we get a set of data as follows. Again, it's probably useful to look at that in a moment in chart format. We've already seen some maps of Tel from Carl's presentation. But just a reminder, Area A is at the south. It's where we find the major ironade structures like the city gates and the chambers. Area B slightly to the north, and it also features, of course, some large Hellenistic courtyard houses. Area C farthest to the north, again a residential area, and as we'll see, an area which was not so significant for the Hasmonean and Herodian period. So looking at that in terms of pie charts, just to give us a visual kind of feedback, in Area A, a large percentage of Ptolemaic coins and Seleucid coins, significant set of Hasmonean and Roman of Herodian coins, and also a substantial number of Roman coins minted prior to 100 CE. Area B, the situation is much the same, except that the contribution by coins from Ptolemaeus is shrinking, and the Seleucid contribution is correspondingly increasing. Area C, interestingly, and the most interesting thing about Area C is not the dominance of Seleucid and Ptolemaic coins, but rather the relative absence of Hasmonean and Herodian coins, which would suggest that the northern end of the settlement was not of particular interest to the local people in the Hasmonean and Herodian period. So because the Hasmonean and Herodian coins are concentrated particularly in areas A and B, that's helpful. We find them in exactly the same places as the earlier Ptolemaic and Seleucid coins. They had taken over and occupied exactly the same parts of town. Hellenistic coins have been entirely displaced by Hasmonean and then later Herodian coins, even before the beginning of the Roman period. And as I noted, Area C may have been peripheral to the Jewish settlement after 100. The next thing is to look at the coins in relationship to related finds from the various loci where the coins were recovered. And I'll just look at a handful of these, and this is particularly where the data from Carl Savage comes into play, and acknowledge Carl's work in checking the records to see what else was found in locus 4100, etc. First coin, we find not a large locus in terms of numbers of finds, but a number of pieces of Hellenistic pottery, some cookware, some potware, global cooking pot, and so on. Early Roman casserole, more or less what you would expect. The next locus, again Herodian coin, almost 400 pieces of mixed pottery, and again all the items that are listed there are exactly the kinds of ceramic material one would expect to find in Galilee at this time, particularly in a Jewish community. The second locus included two coins, one from Antipas, for which I don't have an image at the moment, another from Herod, and again we see mixed pottery, cooking pots and so on, but notice also the reference to limestone pieces, which, as Carl mentioned in his presentation, are possibly degraded limestone or chalk vessels, of course one of the markers of a Jewish settlement. Locus 2150, another coin from Antipas, minted in Tiberias. Again, exactly this kind of stuff we would expect to find, but notice also, just to make it interesting, we have 8 pieces of medieval glaze from the sort of medieval Islamic period, and we have one clay pipe, smoking pipe, from the Ottoman period. Locus 550 is a coin of Philip, issued at Banias. Again, hundreds of pieces of Hellenistic pottery, cooking pots, etc., and also another piece of limestone, most likely a piece of degraded chalkware stone vessels. So in terms of conclusions, what we're dealing with at Et Tel, without making any comments about El Araj or anywhere else, what we have at Et Tel is continued presence from the early Hellenistic period right down until the mid-Roman period. However, a substantial decline of interest in Et Tel after 100 CE, which is not surprising given there is no longer dynastic dynamics going on between Antipas and Philip and their successors, Agrippa I, Agrippa II. This decline extends through to the Byzantine and early Islamic periods. The renewed occupation back in 200 BCE was probably due to its geopolitical significance in terms of tensions between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. Continues to be significant in the Herodian period because of tensions between Philip and Antipas, and then subsequently no longer has that particular geopolitical factor. Et Tel itself was a hinterland site servicing and supported by Tyre prior to the Hasmonean conquest, and it returns to the orbit of Tyre after the end of the 1st century CE. We've already noted a complete cessation of Seleucid Ptolemaic coins after 125, and as well as the Jewish character of the coins during the Hasmonean Herodian period, most markedly the switch to the coins coming from the mint in Jerusalem, with the exception that we get some coins from Tiberias becoming significant after the founding of the city by Antipas in the year 18. In other words, all of the coin finds that we have are entirely consistent with the idea that Et Tel was the location of a Jewish settlement around the turn of the eras. If we just, as a final kind of closing observation, we compare the coins from El Araj with the coins from Et Tel. Et Tel are in blue, El Araj are in the orange colour. Almost no El Araj coin material really prior to 100, but there's at least a couple of Roman 1st century coins and a couple of Herodian coins. So the data speaks for itself in terms of Et Tel and El Araj at this point in their respective excavation histories in the period from about 300 BC through to 100 CE. But if we look at the larger timeline from the 4th century, even the 5th century or 4th century BCE, right through to the modern period, and again the blue columns represent coins from Et Tel, and they're actual raw numbers, they're not percentages. Percentages were being indicated in the pie charts. So we can see prior to 100 BCE, that's before the Hasmonean takeover, the activity that happens at Et Tel in the Hasmonean and Herodian periods is significantly lower level of economic activity to the coins which take place in the Ptolemaic, the activity that takes place in the Ptolemaic and Seleucid period. So through the Hasmonean, Herodian, Roman period, the coins from Et Tel are numerically more significant, more numerous than the El Araj coins, but with further excavations, that may change. But notice what happens once we move from beyond the 2nd and 3rd century into the late Roman, Byzantine, and early Islamic period. Bethsaida almost disappears off the list. Very, very few coins, whereas the coins at El Araj are more significant for the period through the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th century. The medieval period from the Ayyubid dynasty onwards with Salah ad-Din, we find a revival of activity, or at least of coin presence at Et Tel, and again for different geopolitical reasons relating probably to the loss of Egypt from the Ottoman Empire. Palestine becomes a more significant frontier territory for the Ottoman Empire, and we find a lot more activity occurring. So Et Tel goes through a period of significant decline, and that exactly correlates with the time when El Araj is in its heyday. So I'm going to conclude the presentation there, but I look forward to your comments and questions.